National Signing Day is officially upon us tomorrow. Nobody better to help us break down that, the madness with the transfer portal, and much more than our good friend JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur joins us on a weekly basis. JC, what's going on, my man? I appreciate you taking the time during a very hectic and busy time of the year on, off the field, recruiting portal, but of course, life events happening as well, man. Thank you so much for carving out the time.
Yeah, it's no problem. I'm about 11 days from tying the knot in West Palm Beach, and so this one, we had to plan, and so I'm dealing with caterers and groomsmen's gifts and music and walking down the aisle and rings and all that good stuff. But that's okay. I don't know why. I think I'm like the NCAA. NCAA. I mean, I actually feel like a college coach now because the NCAA, wants to schedule everything in these 2 weeks. College football madness. And I think I just do that to myself sometimes. That won't be a problem. Think about what's going on that time of the year. So, but anyway, I'm managing, and you're right. It's interesting, Chris, because tomorrow is National Signing Day. There may be a guy that leaves South Carolina's class for good reason. Maybe if he, decides to do it, that would be Lee, the corner from Maryland. He had a death in the family and may just want to stay close to home, and you can't blame anybody for that, right? Um, Other than that, unless something comes up way out of left field, you're looking at a drama-free signing day as far as the high school class goes. I mean, Gatling, the receivers, who they're kind of waiting on to add him, the former Texas A&M commit from the Atlanta area. Other than that, it looks like a solid group. And I'll say this, Chris, we were talking about this yesterday. If you look at the high school class, it's gonna be about 17 guys. Okay, 8 if they get Gatling, 8 of those guys are in national all-star games, either San Antonio, Orlando, Under Armour, or I guess it's Adidas now. It used to be Army. That's a pretty stout number. I think it's a record for South Carolina. So with all the portal madness out there, I think maybe this very nice high school class is a little bit overlooked, quite frankly, because normally people would be jumping up and down and shooting off fireworks and stuff with this kind of class. But the portal has just sucked all the oxygen out of the room for signing day. So the NCAA for years has been trying to kill signing day because they can't make any money off of it, right? And this goes back to when I worked at Rivals back in the mid 2000s. They just don't like recruiting coverage at all. And there's nothing they can do about it besides make things difficult and try to de-emphasize the day. That's why they moved. They said we'll have 2, and all that's done is create 2 monsters, right? But having the transfer portal madness out there, this has probably put a dent in, your so-called traditional recruiting coverage and your signing day spotlight, because just about all the high school kids are kind of drama-free. You had, Dylan Rivola. I can't believe flip from Mike Bobo to Marcus Satterfield. Good luck, son. You're gonna need it. And that was kind of the most dramatic thing. I mean, everything else is portal. So it's been interesting from that standpoint, Chris, as well.
JC, I'd never thought about it from the NCAA perspective. And, one of my questions I wanted to ask you was, you're somebody, again, you've covered recruiting for a long time, right? I mean, you've been in this recruiting game for quite a while now. How does it make you feel that, like you mentioned, I mean, I think it's very obvious that, the portal's a great thing. I think it's brought a new element, a new layer to collegiate athletics in regards to what we follow, content, right? The drama. I mean, it's basically free agency in college sports. But to the point you made, JC, I remember the days where National Signing Day was like Christmas for college football fans. And it was like, there was no greater thrill than following a guy's recruitment for a year or 2 years or 3 years. And then you land him on signing day and he puts that hat on or he picks your school, and like, that was such a cool moment. And now it feels like, because of the portal and NIL and not even knowing if that guy is going to finish his career at your school or even be there for longer than a year or two, to your point, it's just really put a damper on what National Signing Day is, or at least what it used to be.
Yeah, and I'll say this, here at South Carolina, I think because of the season they had. Everybody's kind of on edge in the off season, so there's tremendous overreaction across the board, and a lot of hyperbole out there. Oh, they're not going to stick with you anyway. But I'll say this: anybody that Shane Beamer has signed since he's been here from the high school level that they've wanted to stick around. In other words, a guy that they didn't say, "Hey, look, you're probably not going to play, or maybe you want to get in the portal," because those conversations happen at every school. We know it. Not all transfer portal defections are created equally. There's not been a single guy from high school that they've signed, this staff has signed, that's left from the high school ranks. That's not, the portal, like Mario and Juice obviously came from the portal and then left or whatever. So that's a good sign. But like you look at Georgia and their defections and how many 5-star guys are in that. And look, I'm not saying those guys are probably not 5-star players. They're probably just misranked, which happens often. But you look at it, and so as a fan, you're a Georgia fan, and you're sitting there going, well, why was I ever excited about this guy? I mean, or 5 of these guys, So from that standpoint, too, I think with the quote unquote bigger schools or brand name schools, because they're all big schools, but that's probably taking more of an impact in the luster off signing day than maybe someplace like here where. This year the class is pretty good. Beamer's done a pretty good job of keeping the good high school talent that he's signed around and stuff like that. There's other issues around here, but like I said, I looked at Georgia's defections and I'm like 5-star, 5-star, 5-star. So either these guys weren't 5 stars, or being a 5-star doesn't really mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. So that's to me that was very interesting to look at that situation at the mighty Bulldogs. The most stable, consistently good program in the country the past 3 years.
So, JC, I want to break down this recruiting class and the prospects and your thoughts on it. Before we do, though, let's just touch on the transfer portal really quickly because, like you mentioned, that's such a massive part of this thing. And I also want to save the National Signing Day stuff for a little bit later. We can really dive into it. South Carolina right now in the 24/7 Sports rankings, I believe, ranks 6th in the transfer portal rankings. 9 commitments right now. I'll just run through these. Running back Oscar Attaway III from North Texas. Of course, Rocket Sanders from Arkansas, the running back. Edge Kyle Kennard from Georgia Tech. Tight end Brady Hunt from Ball State. Wide receiver Jared Brown from Coastal Carolina. Right now, wide receiver Jaden McGowan from Vanderbilt listed. I say right now. We'll talk about that in a second. Running back Jawarn Howell from SC State. Defensive back Gerald Kilgore from East Tennessee State. And finally, defensive lineman DeAndre Jules from Pitt. If you want to talk about the latest with A.J. Swan, the Jaden McGowan situation, but really I just want to get your take, JC, because we didn't get to talk last week. How do you evaluate this transfer portal haul as a whole? And I'm sure you would agree that South Carolina's not done at this point, but based off what they've done so far, your thoughts on the difference makers they have added moving forward, because you and I both knew, and everybody else knew as well, that this was going to be a pivotal portal cycle for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks.
Yeah, well, the running back situation was critical. Mike Morgan and I were talking the other day on the air and he brought up the point, because he covers the SEC. He was like, look, this cannot happen again to Shane Beamer, that the running back. Every school in the league has a pretty good situation at running back. It's a premier spot in this league. You got to have guys there, and they went and got guys. I mean, these three guys. Rocket Sanders had an injury-plagued situation last year. He needs to get healthy and be back to 2022 form. But if he can even get close to that, he's a weapon. And I don't think they're going to have him carry, like the carry load for him will not be as high maybe as it would have been in Arkansas, because Oscar Attaway is really good as well. He's a 5th-year guy, older dude. We talked to his coaches at North Little Rock High School. They said he's the hardest worker that they've ever seen, just a blue-collar guy, but he's fast and big and physical. You watch him on tape. He split time with a scat back kind of guy at North Texas, and that's just kind of how their offense goes. You watch some of his runs, and he's really good. And then Jawarn Howell may be better than anybody. I mean, I hate to invoke the name Derek Squeaky Watson, but if you watch his film from SC State, it's exactly who he looks like, right down to being number 22. Maybe not quite as big as Derek. Maybe in a foot race, Derek would have beat him because Derek had elite speed and breakaway speed, but he's that kind of back. One cut, shoulder pads facing up the field, and he's gone. Elusive, that kind of guy, spin move, all that good stuff. So I think they got a steal in Howell. I can't say enough good about him. And the good thing about him, Chris, he's got 3 more years. So it's just like, so in other words, if you look at the big puzzle of the roster, he replaced Lavoisier Carroll for all intents and purposes. Lavoisier gave up football, whatever. So this guy kind of slid into that spot. And so I like that. Brady Hunt's probably an underrated pickup. He was a freshman All-American at Ball State, 6'6", 250. He's one of those big Midwestern kids, man, from Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, that you never hear about, and then all of a sudden they're playing in the NFL. I'll even throw Ohio in there for my boy Travis Kelce. Shout out. I don't envy your life. But anyway, and he's that kind of guy. And they needed that because you do have Josh Simon and Michael Smith, who are kind of like Trey Knox and Josh Simon last year. I think the younger guys, McKeska, Cook, maybe even Nick Elkson, they probably aren't as far along developmental wise after a year as maybe you'd hope. But they can still get there. I'm not knocking those guys, but you needed a sure thing there because I think one of the most underrated parts of this past year was they missed a guy like Nate Atkins that could do the blocking on a high level, and then also factor in the passing game. Kyle Kennard's a player. I'll tell you right now, the staff had him number 1 as an edge target over a lot of bigger name guys. They thought he was active. He makes plays coming over from Georgia Tech. And then, of course, my favorite guy, DeAndre Jules. You just don't get into the lineup and play for. And I know Pitt was bad. I'm not trying to sit there and praise the mighty Panthers this year, but you don't get on the field and play for Pat Narduzzi unless you're working hard individually. And individually, he had a really good year. Gamecocks beat Florida for him. I think that's important to win battles against those guys. And he's going to come in, compete with Boogie, Tonka, TJ Sanders, and you can kind of see a nice little rotation right there starting to form, along with like Nick Barrett. And then if Jerome Simmons comes in over the summer and can contribute, you could be 6 deep at defensive tackle potentially.
JC, where do you see South Carolina going from here in the portal? I know receiver. Wide receiver.
I'm sorry about that.
Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, hey, listen.
I didn't mean to step on you there.
Oh, that's what stands out. And then since we're talking receiver, what's the deal with the McGowan thing? I know there's a lot of confusion over the last 24 hours or so. I don't know that I've ever seen a kid flip in the portal per se. I don't know that I've ever seen that, but what's the latest? And you mentioned wide receiver is the number 1. Do you have some names of guys out there, or you just know that's a position they are targeting?
There's some guys, and I have very few names, and I don't want to repeat them because if they don't get in the portal, then it's a bad look, on the kid at his current school and stuff. But there are some guys out there that, we sort of hope they get in the portal or whatever. And then there should be a lot of receivers to kind of pick from after bowl season and maybe even over into the spring. It's not ideal to go past the spring, I think, for South Carolina because they just need guys. Jared Brown, fine player. If McGowan sticks, fine player, but you need more guys. I mean, people are kind of obsessed with this wide receiver 1 thing. I think that's a fantasy football term. If we were playing fantasy football, obviously you need a guy like that. But, the wide receiver 1, if you get enough good players, will step up and the cream will rise to the top. Obviously, it always does and seems to do with this program. It's a shame, really, that you don't have that Xavier Legette waiting in the wings like you did this past year, or those years where you had Debo and then he left. So it was Brian Edwards, well, then he left, and then Shy Smith. This is a position that needs work, obviously, but that's the plan moving forward, is to kind of, see who else gets out there. As far as McGowan goes, last night, talking to one contact, I would have said, yeah, he's probably going to flip. But then talking to somebody else close to his situation, probably not. So I don't know. He's a guy that I think's got potential. I think he's a good kick returner already. but he had 12 catches against SEC teams this past year. So, he's got work to do to become a bigger contributor at that level as well. And, if he wants that opportunity in the SEC at South Carolina, he can take it. If you want to go to Chestnut Hill, rock and roll, man, rock and roll. So that's kind of the situation there.
JC, what do you say to the people? I'm sure you get the question a lot. It seems like every time South Carolina has gotten a commitment in the transfer portal, the response or the rebuttal is, okay, but where are the offensive linemen? What do you say to those people? Do you think South Carolina is
Yeah.
fully invested on the guys they're bringing in and recruiting and getting healthy and the guys currently in the room? Do you expect them to be active and add maybe 2 or 3 or 1 or 2, Power 5 or contributors that can come in and fight for playing time? I mean, where does South Carolina stand there? Because I think that's it's fun to get the running backs and the skill position guys, but that's what people remember most, obviously, from the 2023 season is the struggles up front.
I get that totally, but you have to get into the why. Why did they struggle up front? Well, it's because their frontline guys were hurt and injured and out. I mean, you lose the 2 starting tackles should have been the whole year, Casey Henry and Jalen Nichols, and Nichols was out before it even started, and then Henry was out after one play, so that was interesting. And then, so you got to kind of plug and play a tackle. Big Tree gets in there's a true freshman. Trevon Ball's a true freshman. Marquis Anderson would have played had he not, but lo and behold, he's hurt. You had to move Rashawn Lee out to tackle. Nick Gargiulo's in there, and I thought Nick battled his butt off this year and played well enough. The others did not. So when you look at that, it was a mixture of injuries and youth. And so what you're looking at next year, if people want to say, well, why aren't they adding anybody? First and foremost, like the kid from Texas Tech, that his name reminds me of like a subdivision in Simpsonville, Madison Mills or something like that. It's like, you're about at Simpsonville. It's like, oh, here's Madison Mills, a very nice place to live. They take him. I mean, they take a proven tackle, because you just don't turn down proven tackles. But what you're looking at is, okay, so all right, so how are they going to be well, Jalen Nichols is coming back for, I think, year number 7. That's a grown man. And Jalen at the end of 2022 was playing left tackle at a high level. If you remember, he's back. Rashawn Lee is back. Big Tree is back. Trevon Ball is back, and Marquis Anderson's back. Casey Henry's injury is one of those things that he keeps trying to rush. He needs to just chill. Like, he needs to sit in the easy boy recliner and have his girlfriend bring him drinks and food and get up to go to the bathroom, and that's it for about 6 weeks. He just and I respect his competitiveness, I do, but he rushed himself back, and it just got worse and worse. But my understanding is that injury it's just time. You just need time, and so that's the situation. Is everybody's going to get healthy. Plus, you have these young guys that in the 2023 class that played a lot, and that jump from freshman to sophomore year on the offensive line is usually significant if you play. If you don't, it usually takes about 3 years if you're a red shirt. But that second year through the grind, so to speak, usually is pretty good. And there's a reason Ball was a freshman All-American and Babalade was freshman of the week. And they love Anderson probably more than those other two. So, and then you've got Cam Pringle and Josiah Thompson, 2 4 and 5 star guys coming in. And then Blake Franks is a massive human being that could potentially play. So, like I can tell everybody, the situation there, it wasn't like running back where you walk in the room and it's like, hello, anybody? Where's Juju? He's getting rehab. He's the only one left. There were players in that room. It's a mixture of youth and injuries. It was the worst injury situation, Chris, on the offensive line of South Carolina since 1999. And if you remember, the 2000 offensive line led by Cedric Williams and those guys ended up being pretty salty because they were older, they were healthy, and they went out and played some ball. And Lou Holtz won 8 games after winning 0 the year before. So that's the situation there. It's the answers to that are on campus already. Unless, like I said, they get some guy that you just can't turn down because he's got experience playing tackle.
Finally, JC, before we get into National Signing Day, and again, I think this conversation is a little bit of a microcosm of how the transfer portal has taken over in regards to signing day or the portal or what have you, because there's just so much to discuss. But AJ Swann has committed to LSU. KJ Jefferson, it looks like his top three is rumored to be, I think, Miami, TCU, and maybe Auburn is the third. South Carolina not in the mix is the bottom line there. Malik Murphy visited campus, the Texas transfer. Where do they stand with him, JC? And if they don't get him, where do they stand on getting a quarterback or two? Because again, nobody I think is saying South Carolina should go out and find a guy to take Lenoris Sellers' job, if you will, or take over his QB1. But adding competitive depth to the room is something that we have talked about. Where do they stand at the quarterback position?
It's huge. Yeah, Chris, you're right. We're gonna look and find out Dowell Loggins' ability to spot talent. All those years in the NFL, man, he'll be able to find somebody. I keep thinking back. The backup for the Bears is this guy named Tyler. I don't remember his last Begnet, something like that. Undrafted free agent rookie from Shepherdsburg College in West Virginia. They need to find their Tyler Begnet. They can go in there and make something happen. With Malik Murphy, and I've got a different viewpoint than a lot of people with KJ Jefferson. I just, people are like, well, KJ's similar to Lenoris. Well, yes and no. I mean, KJ struggles throwing the ball. I respect the hell out of him. He's one of my favorite players because he's so competitive and physical and tough. But the bottom line is, in this league, you got to be able to throw it. I don't know that in this offense or whatever. I just don't know that he's a fit, and I don't know that he would beat out Lenoris. Now Malik, that's a different story to me. It's like, yeah, well, he does some different types of things. He's a different kind of guy, electric almost, which I think Lenoris Sellers will end up being. But Malik's kind of a different animal. I did hear Duke is probably where he's going to go. I did hear Duke's got a sizable Manny Diaz. I guess they handed him some NIL money up there, and so and that's kind of I would have thought Malik Murphy, after what he did at Texas this year, would have had a lot of big options, but no, I guess. But so we'll see what the deal is with that. But I think it's going to be. I think the AJ Swann situation was very unfortunate because I've said from the start. I even said it on the show, I think, before they even contacted AJ Swann, that's the type of guy. Swan or Seals, one of those guys from Vandy that started, that was just looking for a fresh start, that can come in and get you through. If there's an injury, and I think the LSU situation, I think AJ feels like, and his mom feel like that they're probably a little more similar to Garrett Nussmeier quarterback wise than they are to Sellers here. And plus it's LSU. So, I think that was the draw there, but he was the welcome home that we were missing out there. I think that's been reported. So nobody's gonna get mad at me about that. So, if McGowan flips, there's technically going to be two technically flips, I guess. I guess it's not really a flip if it's not public, but that's only the second welcome home or third where the guy's not ended up coming or committing in public. So Beamer's got a pretty good track record there, but so that's the deal with that. So I think that was the AJ Swann thing. I think kind of threw the quarterback situation a little bit chaos, but there's guys out there. I mean, there's some kids in the MAC that are possibilities and stuff like that. But they, I think right now though, if you're a fan, you got to put your faith in Dowell Loggins' ability to evaluate, because that's it's going to be an evaluate. It's not going to be somebody where you go, man, great, I'm fired up that he's here. It's going to be kind of an unknown, and that's hopefully better than the I guess the reaction when he signs. How about that?
JC, to National Signing Day 2024. Of course, tomorrow is the day that pen hits paper for many of the top prospects in college football. Gamecocks right now sitting ranked 18th overall, 9th in the SEC. Of course, the class, JC, is headlined by Dylan Stewart, the five-star edge out of the DMV, 6'5", 235. Of course, it's one of the best offensive line classes South Carolina's ever hauled in as well, with Josiah Thompson, Cam Pringle, Blake Franks. As you mentioned, some nice defensive pieces and guys like Wendell Gregory leading the way. Maz Bennett at the wide receiver position gives you a playmaker. Let me ask you this, JC, because again, the obvious headliner here is Dylan Stewart and the big offensive lineman. Who's a guy in this class that you think maybe is a little bit under the radar, not being talked about a lot, that you could see coming in and making a big impact early on?
It's hard for me to like say this because he's a top 60 player, but I mentioned Michael Smith, the tight end earlier from Savannah, who committed way early. I think he was way early. This kid's got a little bit of freak in him, you know, and if you're short at receiver next year, you probably are going to not do what you did this year. You're probably going more two tight ends with Sellers and a run game and a respectable run game and all that. So there's going to be an opportunity for, I think, him to get on the field. I think Josh Simon's poised to have a really big year next year. So maybe, you know, Michael's not going to be talked about a lot in the preseason, but he's got enough freakiness to where if you're looking for a guy that you're like, man, I forgot he was even committed, it would be Michael Smith. There's a reason Auburn and Tennessee made huge runs at that guy. You know, and while the Gamecocks were losing games, they tried to kind of get that guy in. He's a playmaker and a special talent and a really good high character guy. So out of Savannah Christian. So I think that, and Savannah is a place Carolina should recruit well. It's closer to Columbia than it is to Athens. So, and he's got a teammate that's I think the number 2 player in the country for 2025. So hopefully, you know, that pipeline continues. But Michael Smith would be my pick, kind of right off the top of my head.
And then, JC, you look at the class, you know, again, I think Dylan Stewart would be the easy answer, but who's the guy you see making the most immediate impact for South Carolina? Maybe next year could be a contributor and a guy who makes a difference.
Can I have two answers on this?
Yeah,
one?
for sure.
Co-leaders. Dylan Stewart, he's too good not to play. You know, some defensive ends, Chris, that are ranked highly, they need a year. You know, Jadeveon Clowney wasn't really one of them. Much was made out of him not starting, but his second game against Georgia, he took Aaron Murray and him and anyway, that dude was a freak. But a lot of DNs don't. They get to school and they need a year. You know, I mean, maybe they get stronger and stuff. Dylan Stewart, when you watch him play, whether he's standing up, whether he's got his hand in the ground, his floor is like amazingly high, right? In fact, the evaluators at 24/7, the reason he's not in the top 5 is they think he's almost there, you know, kind of like Nolan Smith at Georgia would be a comparison. I think he's bigger than Nolan, but Nolan was that guy that was just ready to roll. So he's going to play. And then Jalua Solomon, I think at corner, will he be the starter? I don't know. I kind of think I'm leaning more towards like Vakari Swain or Judge Collier along with OD Fortune. But he's going to get into the top mix. He was the number 1 corner on their board. They covet that guy. They think he's just an amazing player. So people ask me all the time, who could be the next Gilmore, J.C. Horn, or whoever that starts, Captain Munnerlin that starts as a true freshman from the beginning at that spot. Well, next up at bats, Jalua Solomon, I think. So those 2 guys would be who I would circle right now. And you know, and obviously, you know, like your receiver, like Mazio Bennett's probably getting in the rotation, and Gatling, if he signs with Carolina, the former A&M commits, sort of that other high floor type of guy. But if I'm going to stick with the top 2 there as far as immediate impact on defense, there, Stewart and Solomon.
JC, final thing before we get you out of here on the recruiting side of things. Again, we get so lost, I feel like, naturally in the stars and the rankings. Here's what you're ranked nationally. Here's what you're ranked in the SEC. And certainly those things are important. It's kind of funny, though, with the SEC, you can be ranked 17th nationally, but be 12th in the SEC in recruiting because the league is so competitive. But what recruiting, JC, really comes down to, it's not about stars. It's about addressing positions of need, areas of need, getting your numbers right, boosting the rooms you need to boost, increasing competitive depth. That's how you win, right? Again, you could add 25-star quarterbacks in a cycle and have the number 1 rated class, and you wouldn't have accomplished anything, right? You and I would both agree. So when you look at this class for South Carolina, again, probably not going to be a lot of drama tomorrow. There'll probably be some more additions in the portal, but I'd imagine that a lot of the heavy lifting is done to this point. When you're talking National Signing Day, when you're talking transfer portal, all the above, how do you feel South Carolina? How do you feel Shane Beamer, the job he's done in regards to addressing the needs of the football team and best setting them up for success moving into 2024?
Yeah, I think it's a very good job. I mean, you've got probably pound for pound one of the best high school classes in program history. Let's just be honest. I mean, they've never had 8 guys in Under Armour and Army, and that's a good beyond stars. That's a good point of view because those are professional people that take a look at the players and pick them for those games. They've never had that. I think the most they've ever had is 4. Across both games, so that's big. Having 2 5-star linemen is big. Having a 5-star from out of state is big for this program. And then with the portal, I think they've attacked it aggressively. They've gotten some needs filled, and a lot of guys that make you feel better about next season. Quite frankly, where I think they're maybe a little short, I'd like to see them with another edge or two. What I would have liked to see maybe another high school edge. The Cameron Fountain situation stung a bit because that gives you some bookends with he and Stewart. If they can find another edge in the portal, certainly I think he would be welcome. A defensive tackle high school recruiting needs to step up, obviously, and that's not anybody's fault. Travian Robertson, where most kids are deciding in the summer now, man, he got here like May. No time to build relationships. And then Georgia offered every single D tackle on the board and got them all. How about that? And so D tackle recruiting is an area they need to, from the high school rank starting in 2025, you got to get it going. And then, I think receiver as well. I think Gatling and Bennett are good to go, but, you're getting awfully young there. You got to hope Kelton Henderson, Elijah Caldwell, Tyshawn Russell, and Nick Harbor take a big step this offseason because it is a mystery. So receivers, maybe as well. I know they flipped the position in the portal, but, I would have liked to have seen them landed another high school running back, frankly. They struck out on everybody but Fuller. So that's not a big criticism, but that's just something where you kind of feel kind of breaking it down as far as filling needs. There's always more than one way to get things done, and that's fine. They filled the need. That's the bottom line. But, you sit there, you're going 1 for 4 with your running backs when the need is obvious. That's what's maybe a new sales pitch you can come up with if those are the results there. So that's kind of my, long and short of it with this class. I think, overall people should be thrilled. I think, like I said, people probably aren't because the portal is sucking. It's like maybe the black hole, that old Disney movie. It's like the black hole, dude. It's like, God almighty, portal. I got this AI program that can do little cartoons. I may type in black hole football recruiting and see what it comes up with.
It is indeed affecting it that way, JC. But still, for those of us who have followed college football for forever, college ball recruiting, there still is some joy in it. Kind of an early Christmas for college football.
Yeah.
That being said, JC, I appreciate you taking the time, my man. Thank you so much. Hey, Merry Christmas to you and yours. Happy New Year. And we'll talk to you in 2024.
Thanks. I want to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you, Chris. It's been a blessing being on the show. And to all the fans of the Spurs Up show out there, Merry Christmas to you guys too.